Welcome back to Let's Talk About Today with Arvin. Today on the show, I am very, very excited to have such a very special guest, someone who has, been a strong and bold leader in Ontario for many, many years. I am so honored to say that we have on the show the Honorable Andrea Horwath, the leader of the Ontario NDP. Andrea, thank you so much for joining the show.
Hey, my pleasure, Arvin. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. So Andrea, first of all, how are you doing yourself?
I'm doing okay. Thank goodness. No COVID exposure. And I'm lucky, much more lucky than many Ontarians. I have a support network. I still have, my job, if you will. And so I do every day recognize and acknowledge and be thoughtful about, the privileged place that I'm in compared to what so many other people are grappling with. I mean, everything from the tragedies that people are dealing with in terms of loss of life of loved ones, but also small businesses, and not only economically, but there's a grieving process there too, as you know, when small businesses have to close, and students, particularly post-secondary, in such a flux. And I mean, it's been really tough on people. So thank you for asking. And I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
I'm trying to stay sane. I've been just at home for the past 3 months, not really going outside. So but yeah, it's what it is. And it is a difficult time. And I know with all that's been going on in Ontario, we see you doing fantastic work holding the Ford government to account, especially during this pandemic. But I think it's really important for young people to sort of hear your fascinating story about your fascinating career, because it is very inspiring and motivating to so many, young people who are interested in politics and, social change in their communities. So in general, I just, reading up about you, I wanted to ask about, your early life and sort of your finding interest in social studies and politics. I mean, growing up, what was sort of your first impactful experience with, politics and social sciences?
Well, I actually think probably the most impactful situation that I faced as a young person happened even before university. My dad was an auto worker. I lived in Steeltown, Hamilton, but my dad was an auto worker. And I can remember in the 70s when he went on strike, and that was the first time, I had to even face the issues around workers rights, what unions were, and all those pieces. And so I think that was a part of it, kind of getting a sense of where myself and my family were, in the kind of in the food chain, if you will, knowing that we were a working class family, but also that when it comes to that, how privileged we were to have a good working, a good job for a unionized workplace, and what that brought. But then really the next kind of piece would have been probably in university. I mean, certainly in high school, I was always for the underdog. And, I can remember defending my younger brothers in the schoolyard and things like that. And I don't talk about this a lot, but I started in commerce. And then I just couldn't hack the lack of acknowledgement of the one input cost, which was labeled labor. And it was just seen as another input cost as opposed to real people. And I think that was part of a turning point for me. I switched to labor studies and did a lot of work on labor studies and women's issues, and graduated university into working with the local labor movement and employers to help mostly immigrant workers learn English, to help them transition, because Hamilton was transitioning out of the industrial economy, and we had hit a recession, and so there was a lot of work to do to try to give people some of the skills they needed to be able to just survive, and to because when they get hired in the steel plants back in the day, you just show up at the plant gate, and you're hired. No resumes, no kind of job interviews, nothing like that. So that was my kind of that first work that I did that really, I mean, I think it was for me a realization that I had to be, working with people and for people. That's where my passion comes from. And so, I've just worked from there.
That's so fascinating. I mean, I didn't know that's so interesting that first of all you saw, within your family how social change can impact people's families, and then in university that's so interesting that you sort of discovered your interests and how you can sort of make a change in the community by with what you're studying, right? So that's so fascinating. That's so awesome. So during that time, you're so involved with the community in Hamilton and just in the South Ontario area and helping out people and workers. So what sort of, I guess, because you were so involved with community change and I guess like organizing and social organizing and that stuff, what sort of like I guess motivated you to want to jump into politics and sort of use the political institutions to make some change?
No, that's a really great question, Arvin. And what ended up happening was absolutely that. I went on to work in social housing for a while, and then at a community legal clinic. And a lot of our work was around law reform. So I was working with tenants, advocating with tenants for changes in landlord-tenant legislation. For example, I was working on environmental issues because it was Hamilton, working on women's issues, working with people with disabilities, all about kind of working with people to identify how things could be better for them, and then pushing the folks that had decision making power to make those changes actually start considering these people and their needs. And so what ended up happening was I got tired of knocking on the door from the outside, and I wanted to sit at the decision making tables on the inside to actually try to push that change from the other side of the table. And that's why I ran for public office in Hamilton City Council in 1997, which is a long time ago now. But 1997 is when I made the switch, if you will. And it wasn't, we were in a situation in Ontario where the government had changed. The Conservative government had been elected, and they were making things worse and not better for tenants and for environmental protections and for a lot of these pieces. And so I saw the watering down of some of the provincial policy areas that really made a difference for people. And that's why and they were downloading those kinds of decisions to the municipal level. So affordable housing got downloaded, and land ambulance got downloaded, and social services got downloaded. And so I thought, well, gee, now those decisions are coming to a council table where a lot of the council members, and no disrespect, but they were used to roads and bridges and water systems and parks and libraries, which are all really important. But I really thought we needed to have people at the council table that had some experience on social policy issues. And so a bunch of my kind of social activist friends and I drew straws, and I got the short straw. And so they all got behind me, and I got elected to city council in Hamilton.
Wow, that's really awesome. Holy, that's something. That's quite the story because you were this, I guess, like a very vocal young voice, and I can bet at the time there weren't as many sort of younger people. It was mostly just people who had a career before, I guess, and you were just like, no, it's about time we have some younger voices trying to make some change in the community. And so with that time in city council and then eventually running for provincial politics, what were some of those experiences like? I guess on the municipal level, the work you were doing, and then sort of making that leap into provincial politics.
Well, I mean, as you can imagine, in the 90s, it was interesting. You're absolutely right to identify there were very few young people engaged at the municipal level or in any order of government, and very few women. And the women that were involved were women that, as you described, had finished their careers. I had one counselor tell me that, give luck to you, dear. I waited until my children were all grown and out of the house before I decided to run for politics. So there was definitely some, patronizing attitudes, and it was tough. And I can remember, I mean, sitting in these meetings where literally the vast majority of people in the room were men, and they were men that were older than me. And so it took a little bit to actually jump into the discussions. But once I did, it was I think really important to be there. And I think I really made some changes, not only for Hamilton, but as a kind of model for other jurisdictions, other cities and towns. And I can remember being often asked to come and speak at women in politics conferences and those kinds of things. And now today I'm the leader of the official opposition in Ontario, and I have a caucus of 40 MPPs. 20 of them are women. Many of them are young people, and we represent the cultural and racial and ethnic and religious diversity of our entire province. And then, I mean, I'm really proud to be able to do that, because I did become the leader of the party over 10 years ago now, and that was one of the things that I was determined to do, and that was my part of my campaign, is to open up the NDP, and make it younger and make it actually look like what we talk about in terms of our values. And so not only was that something that I mean, nobody does those things alone. I mean, I had a lot of support and a lot of people on my team, and a lot of folks that helped to make that transformation happen. But it happened, and it wasn't easy. But it happened, and I'm really proud of that, because we have to have people who represent our communities making the decisions about those communities. Otherwise, we get government that's very, very out of touch with the people they represent.
Definitely, for sure. And I mean, as you mentioned, like if we look at, 2004 when you first got involved in provincial politics, and then we look today, it's like vastly different. And it's just very more, as you said, very very much more representative of our province. And as you said, many more, women representatives, and the more, women we have in politics, the better. And so, as you mentioned, this journey to where we are today, during that time, because you were breaking many barriers and sort of, I guess, being setting an example for so many other people. Do you have any, like, I guess, memorable moments where you sort of look back and you're like, wow, I've really made such a big change in this field?
Well, you know what? I think there are a couple of milestones, if you want to call them that. And I think, when you look at representation, particularly, it would have been the 2000 and, I guess, 18, no, the 2014 election, when for the first time in Ontario we had, was it 2014? Maybe it was 2000. Yeah, it was in 2014, when we had for the very first time 50% women in our caucus. I mean, that was a huge accomplishment. There had never in the history of any jurisdiction in Canada been 50% women in the caucus, or in the government. And it wasn't in the government because we were the opposition. We were the third party, actually. We weren't even official opposition at that time, but we had 20 MPPs, and 10 of them were women. And so going into 2018, just as a bit of an aside, you always you reach a milestone, and then you don't want to slide backwards. So when we were preparing for the 2018 campaign, I said to my team, we have these things don't happen by accident. So the NDP has in place specific procedures and processes and accountability around making sure that we are searching out candidates that reflect the values and beliefs that we have around representation. And so we were successful in 2014, but 2018, as we're recruiting candidates, I said to the team, I don't want to go backwards. So we need to make sure that we have women candidates, and that we have people that represent the communities that we're trying to win seats in, that reflect the people that they're representing. But so sure enough, 2018, again, 50% women in our caucus. So for the second time. And we, for the first time in the history of Ontario, we have a Black caucus. We've had of course, with Jagmeet, back in the day, we had the Jagmeet Singh, the first turban-wearing Sikh member of our caucus. So these things are extremely important, and they. But we had the first Indigenous person, the first First Nations person in the legislature is a member of our caucus, and so. What does this do? I mean, it creates a table where we make decisions based on the lived experiences, the realities of people that reflect who we are in community, and it's something I'm pretty proud of, I have to say.
Definitely, for sure. I mean, that, as you said, the more people you have sitting around the table, the more voices being heard, it can only contribute to making a better Ontario. So, Andrew, I know you have to go in a couple minutes, but I just wanted to ask you. I mean, with all that's been going on in the past couple of years with Premier Ford, his unprofessionalism, and he's just unfit to lead our province. Frankly, we've seen during this COVID-19 pandemic, but I guess sort of on a positive note, because I know you've been holding the Ford government to account, making sure that they're at least doing the best they can to make sure Ontario is heading in the right direction. But still, there's lots of room for improvement. So, do you think that there's something, as soon as possible that the Ford government needs to really pay attention to make sure Ontarians are, I guess, safe and secure? And then also, for yourself, I guess, is there something that you sort of foresee that Ontarians need to pay attention to, or a certain, type of change that we need to make sure that Ontario is heading in the right direction in, this coming decade?
I want to say that we're now in the phase of trying to get the vaccines into people's arms. And I mean, put aside some of the federal issues around access and distribution to the provinces, but we're falling behind when it comes to access to the vaccines and distribution of vaccines local, like in Ontario. We found out that tomorrow Quebec is going to start actually vaccinating people. Today, the Alberta government went online and started making appointments to start vaccinating people. And from the Ford government, we heard today that they won't be able to even start implementing their plan until the 15th of March. So we still have to wait another 2.5 weeks before the vaccine rollout is up and running in Ontario. And so that's bad enough that we're at the back of the pack. But when you layer that on to the fact that they've opened up Ontario too fast, that they're refusing to put in place things like paid sick days, things like lower classroom sizes, they're not adding those extra pieces, the extra help that people need. They're not helping small businesses get through. There's just a lot that the government can be doing to help us to prevent a third wave from happening. But all the experts have said, without a solid vaccine plan online, without these extra health measures, without the government actually starting to spend some money and invest in these kinds of things, we're headed for a third wave. And that's terrifying. So when it comes to the first part of your question, there are things that the government should and could be doing. The problem is Doug Ford just doesn't want to spend the money, and he didn't want to spend the money to plan for the vaccines far enough in advance so that we wouldn't be, in the situation we are, which is like really at the back of the pack of the provinces. And we're 10th of all the provinces and territories. When you look just at the provinces, we're 7th when it comes to vaccine rollout. But the number of where we are isn't as important as the fact that puts people's lives at risk, and it risks the spread of COVID-19 even further, especially with the variants of concern. And it also risks a further lockdown, and so more small businesses closing, and especially if the government's not prepared to help financially for those businesses. More schools and colleges and universities in a chaotic situation, more frontline healthcare workers burnt out, more hospitals not able to meet the demand, more surgeries and other procedures being canceled. That's the problem. And so when we look to the future, though, just to finish off, Arvin, with your question, it really has to. We really have an opportunity here. Because we have to rebuild after COVID-19. And what we're saying as New Democrats is that we need to rebuild in a way that reduces the inequities that we have in our society. I mean, COVID-19, I think, really shone a spotlight on the inequities that we knew already existed, on the things that government wasn't getting right, from long-term care to essential workers being exploited in terms of wages, benefits, and sick days and things like that. And so we have an opportunity now to say, if COVID showed us all of these cracks in in the fabric of our society, or the phrase in the fabric of our support systems, we can't ignore that anymore. I mean, it's pretty stark. We need to deal with it, and so we need to kind of rebuild in a way that is more equitable. We have to rebuild in a way that everybody has a chance to build a great life here in this province, because that's the dream of every Ontarian, whether you have been living here for generations with your family, whether you've arrived in the last 5 years, in the last 2 weeks. That's the dream, and we can actually fulfill that dream, but it takes public policy initiatives and a commitment to do so. So I think that's the vision for the future.
Well said. Yeah, 100% for sure. That is wonderful way to end off on. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and this really means a lot. Thanks.
Absolutely my pleasure. Stay safe.